Okay, so let's get started, and we'll first of all talk about what is spam and what is a hoax email and what do they hope to achieve.
Okay. Spam is when a huge amount of emails are sent out, usually in an automated way by compromised computers, and they're just millions of emails are sent out to any mailbox that they can find.
So they're working on like a percentage basis, like they put out as many as they can, and if 1% turns out to actually click on the link that they've provided or whatever it may be, if you're sending out 3 million of them, then that 1% is quite a huge number.
That's right. Spam emails now constitute a huge proportion of all traffic across the internet.
Yeah.
So mail servers and firewalls just drop it. So it's like it's flying around the internet, and most of the time it's just dropped.
Yeah.
But as you say, every now and again, someone will click on it, and then, yeah, we're in trouble.
And as an example of that, actually, just to show you that the bigger you are, the more of a target you are. According to Steve Ballmer, who used to be the CEO of Microsoft, Bill Gates gets up to 4 million emails a year, and of which over 90% of those are spam.
So there you go.
Poor old Bill.
Poor Bill. Yeah. Okay. And then we got hoax emails.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Well, it's not really so much a difference. Spam is like the method by which it's delivered.
Yep.
And the hoax email itself is something that's trying to convince you to do something that seems legitimate, but again, will be malicious for you.
Right.
We'll
okay.
go through a couple of examples a bit later on this.
Sure. All right, so what's next?
Phishing. We were going to talk about phishing.
Okay, and
Or
this isn't
PH.
fishing. This isn't fishing with a rod and reel, although it's similar.
Yeah.
But this is fishing with a PH.
Yeah, that's right. It originally came about, I think when back in the days of modems and phone, PH phone. But phishing is similar to a hoax email. It's generally looking to get you to hand over your username, password, your credentials for something. So sometimes they're like a common one was a screensaver.
Yep.
Here's a nice free screensaver for your computer, and when you click on that attachment, it'll upload malware to your computer.
Right, so the actual screensaver image itself will be loaded with malware that just wants to get into your computer so it can take over your computer without, and when you click on that, you're basically giving it permission to do that.
That's right, it still needs you to do that, so hence phishing. There's a more refined form of phishing called spear phishing.
Spear phishing?
Yes.
Okay, what's the difference between spear phishing and normal phishing?
Phishing's again a bit like spam, it's just out there to see who they can find. Spear phishing is much more targeted.
Right.
And this has become a lot more common where, there's been some big breaches lately where some high-level employees of companies that have a lot of access to those networks, criminals will do some research on that person.
Right.
Specifically on that
person.
So
they'll look at the About Us and our people on their website, the company website, and then try to target those people, especially the ones that might have high security privileges within the company.
That's right. They get a profile on people.
Right.
Huge security company called RSA got breached.
Yeah.
And that was breached because of a spear phishing attack on one individual, I hear.
Right.
And the email pertained to his children. So it said something along the lines of, there's been an epidemic at your children's school, and the school was correct, and the children were correct. Of course, there was an attachment. The person clicked on it, and away it went.
Wow.
So spear phishing.
Very, very dangerous.
Mm.
Okay, so what's next?
Well, we've got a term they call man in the middle.
Man in the middle.
Man in the middle attack.
Sort of self-explanatory, really.
Yeah, it kind of is. So you have you've got a service here, which is your bank you want to log on to.
Yep.
And you've got your browser here, which is passing the information, the credentials.
Yep.
And they will put a piece of malware in the middle to capture. So,
Right.
Instead of seeing the proper site, you're seeing something that looks like it, but it's actually that criminal site over there.
So they basically create a fake version of the site that you're trying to access and then get you to click on what you would think is your normal access methodology. However, you'll find that it's not really that site.
No.
And then when you click on that, it downloads all the malware and gets you into just as much trouble.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways of doing it, but it's essentially the idea of putting something in between you and the service you want.
Right. And then you can skim away all of the passwords you might put in or anything else that you might need, all your account details and credits that you put in there, then they can take and then they can use.
Yep. That's where it ends up.
Wow.
Mm.
All right, so cross-site scripting.
Cross-site scripting. Okay, this is a big one.
Yeah.
Cross-site scripting effectively means you can use scripts from the client side, meaning the computer,
Yep.
and inject those into websites.
Ah.
Cross-site scripting is a big one. It was 85% of vulnerabilities in the last few years were this type of thing.
Wow.
And it comes down to the coding of web applications. So if they're not coded correctly, you can confuse them, and it allows you to do this kind of thing.
That's right. Now, once your computer's been compromised, normally you're not even aware of it, except for the fact that a lot of times they will be using your computer in order to create something that's called a botnet.
Yes, botnets. Okay, so botnets are pretty scary.
Yeah.
It used to be viruses and so forth just affected one computer. Now a botnet is created when a whole bunch of computers have suffered the same vulnerability and been infected, and they end up becoming slaves.
So do they basically look for computers with vulnerable exploits that haven't, let's say, got the right security settings, or they haven't got proper antivirus software, or they haven't got any firewalls set up or whatever?
These are all things that can help.
So basically, if your computer isn't set up in a certain way to stop these things, then what will happen is you will be compromised when you go online.
So botnets, huge collections of compromised computers they don't know, and they act towards as one. So they can do things like send out all those millions and millions of spam emails.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And the other one that's common these days is called a DOS attack, or DDoS.
Right, distributed denial of service attack.
Denial of service, that's right.
Right. Now, how does that work? That means you get all these, once it's become compromised, your computer gets called a zombie computer.
That's right. It's a zombie.
And so they can get as many as they possibly can. So let's say that they've managed to pull over 1 million zombie computers. And what they do is they make those computers send out a request on the bottom level, because it's
It's just the internet.
Yeah.
So they point them at a domain.
Yep.
So say there was, what it effectively does is ends up taking down websites.
Yep.
All right, takes them down.
Through overloading it with traffic.
That's exactly right. So millions just making these requests, the web servers can't cope.
Yep.
And it falls over.
Yeah.
Really good example of that was a few years ago, Russia, and was it Estonia?
Yeah, that's right. They took down the statue from the central square.
Yes,
and the Russians got very, very upset
Very
with
upset.
that, and they launched a denial of service attack that took the entire country of Estonia offline
for a long time.
for a very long
It was
time.
like 2 or 3 months or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, it can be bad, and they're now considered weapons, cyber weapons, because you can take out really important services that way.
That's right. Well, I mean, Stuxnet was the real first
Stuxnet, yes.
cyber weapon in
Yes, that's
every
right.
sense of the word. It was a weapon.
What was Stuxnet?
Well, see, Stuxnet was created. It's up in the air about how it was created and who was created, but it was something to do with the NSA and another certain country's intelligence services. And what they basically did was they were looking for really sort of like they went for the infrastructure of computers that were doing functional things. Like in this case, for Stuxnet, they were looking at nuclear reactor computers.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they would change from within Stuxnet. It would change the way that it read certain meters, and it would change the way that it did looking after, let's say, heat within the reactor and stuff like that. And it would not show to the user that they were actually raising the temperature in the hopes of making the reactor melt down.
Yeah, it was around the whole Iran thing about the nuclear program.
That's right.
And this virus effectively messed up the centrifuges.
Yeah.
And, attacked these nuclear reactors. So it was a very political thing, but it just sort of shows that, weapons aren't just missiles and bullets anymore.
That's right.
It's cyber stuff.
We're living in a cyber world, and cyber weapons are here.
Yes. So there are a few of the terms and concepts.